administration has pushed has been about white supremacy, your fear. In fact, you say things like, oh, you just want them to come in so that they will vote for you, because we know that when you look at the numbers, I mean, I'm just being real with this, but white people, they're not the ones that carry the Democrats. They aren't. And so this is literally about, you say things, you tell on yourselves. You believe that somehow they will become citizens and they will start voting in the interest of equity.
A small Texas town of roughly 6,000 people was nearly home to an ICE detention facility built to hold up to 10,000 people, more people locked up than the entire population of the town itself. That facility almost happened in Hutchins, Texas. It didn't, because residents organized and fought it. And in the same floor speech where Representative Jasmine Crockett laid that out, she pointed to something else on the record. This administration raised the refugee cap specifically for white South Africans, setting a target of 17,500 additional admissions in a single year. Both of those facts come from the same immigration policy run by the same administration in the same year. Crockett didn't stop at the numbers. She connected them directly to the sitting president's own words about immigrants poisoning the blood, and to the reality that many of the people currently being detained by ICE are indigenous to this land, not the descendants of colonizers claiming to defend it. I'm Caleb Morgan. If you are new here, hit that subscribe button, because we do not flinch and we do not let that slide. So let's get into it.
Mr. Chair, and this amendment specifically, as it goes back to what my colleague was just saying, it's about these Amazon warehouses. And I know that there's been a lot of talk about sanctuary cities and blue states and red states and things like that. But I want to tell you the story of a town by the name of Hutchins. In the town of Hutchins, there was a proposal for ICE to purchase a building that was 1 million square feet. It was a warehouse. It had previously been utilized specifically by Amazon. And the Department of Homeland Security and ICE considered the site to convert it into a massive detention facility, which would have held roughly 9,500 to 10,000 individuals, far exceeding the small town's population of around 6,000 people. In the following weeks, the people rose up and the people decided that they were going to push and use every tool in their toolbox to make sure that this ICE facility did not go through. The town of Hutchins is actually in Texas. It actually sits in Texas 30. And I do want to applaud not only the people of the town of Hutchins, but also my elected officials on every single level that worked together to make sure that that was shut down. But let's talk about what this is really about. And I know y'all knew it was coming, especially once I showed up. It's racist. It's just racist, 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 okay? Now let me tell you why it is racist, all right? This ain't about whether or not you're concerned that the immigrant is coming in and the immigrant is gonna kill everybody. That is not what it is. It's not. It's the things like what your fearless leader said when he said they're poisoning the blood, okay? What this is about is racism. Because the last time I checked, supposedly this administration, not even just this administration, let me just be clear. Your president, he is the one that said white South African refugees needed their own program. And so therefore, he decided that he would raise the cap on how many refugees could come into the United States, but it was only raised for white South Africans. The administration set a limit of 17,500 slots, planned to admit more white South Africans as refugees this year. So here's the point. Every time I see these images of these officers who obviously are completely incompetent, none of that money that has been given to ICE has been given so that they could be trained up and know how to do the daggone job. Seems like they are specifically targeting people because of how they look. In fact, earlier, one of my colleagues from across the aisle was talking about, let's not forget our history, as he quoted the history of how his family came in. And I guess he was trying to say they came in the right way. Let me be clear about something. The people that were here are the indigenous folk. And you know who ICE been rounding up? They've been rounding up indigenous people, the people that originally came, not the colonizers, but the original people. So what this is about is whiteness. Everything that this administration has pushed has been about white supremacy, your fear. In fact, you say things like, oh, you just want them to come in so that they will vote for you, because we know that when you look at the numbers, I mean, I'm just being real with this, but white people, they're not the ones that carry the Democrats. They aren't. And so this is literally about, you say things, you tell on yourselves. You believe that somehow they will become citizens and they will start voting in the interest of equity. Those are the things you fight against when you say no diversity, equity, and inclusion. You want to sit up here and act like the crime is being perpetrated by people of color, but the statistics say otherwise. If you look at the real numbers, I know that y'all believe in propaganda and y'all don't want people to know the truth, and y'all definitely don't want them to know history, because then you got to, again, acknowledge colonizing. But nevertheless, when you look at the numbers, you want to tell me about one-offs. And listen, as a criminal defense attorney, I have represented people of all colors. Let me tell you, anybody can commit a crime on any given day. The idea that you put a white sweeping brush on everybody that happens to have a little bit of melanin as a criminal, that is really the crime. When you are elected to represent somebody, you should be understanding that your job is to fight for everybody. And what makes this country great is our diversity.
Let's start with the number that should stop everyone in their tracks. A proposed detention facility in Hutchins, Texas, sized to hold up to 10,000 people in a town whose entire population is around 6,000. Sit with that math for a second. That's not a facility built to serve a community's needs. That's a facility built to warehouse more human beings than the town itself contains, dropped into a place that never asked for it, and the only reason it didn't happen is because the people of Hutchins organized, pushed back, and used every tool available to them to stop it. That's local democracy working exactly the way it's supposed to, minus, but it shouldn't have had to work that hard against a proposal this disproportionate in the first place. Now, here's where Crockett's speech gets to the actual substance, because she doesn't just name the Hutchins facility and move on. She draws a direct line to policy decisions made by this same administration around who gets welcomed into this country and who gets detained in facilities like the one Hutchins fought off. She points to the administration's own decision to raise the refugee cap specifically for white South African applicants. 17,500 additional slots specifically carved out. Compare that to the posture toward migrants at the southern border, where the administration's own rhetoric has described immigrants using language about poisoning the blood. Those are two different postures toward two different groups of people seeking entry into the same country under the same administration at the same time. Crockett's point isn't subtle, and it isn't supposed to be. When your immigration policy treats different people differently based on where they're from and what they look like, that's not a border security policy. That's a preference. And then Crockett makes an argument that deserves more attention than it usually gets in these debates: the framing of who actually belongs here in the first place. A colleague on the other side of the aisle invoked his own family's immigration story, framing it as coming in the right way. Crockett's response cuts right to the historical record. The people who were here first, before any wave of immigration this country has ever debated, were indigenous peoples. And she points out that ICE enforcement has swept up indigenous people in its net as well. That's worth sitting with, because it exposes the selective memory built into a lot of immigration rhetoric, a story that starts wherever it's convenient to start, rather than with the actual history of who was on this land first and who came after. Crockett also pushes back directly on the crime narrative that so often gets used to justify aggressive ICE enforcement. Her point, grounded in her own experience as a criminal defense attorney, is straightforward. Crime isn't confined to any one racial or ethnic group, and the data doesn't support treating it that way. Painting an entire population as inherently criminal because of how they look isn't public safety policy. It's exactly this kind of broad brush targeting that shows up in enforcement patterns like the ones she's describing. Step back and look at what actually happened in Hutchins and what it represents. A private company's former warehouse was nearly converted into a facility to detain thousands of people in a town of a few thousand residents. That plan moved forward far enough to require organized public resistance to stop it. And it happened under an administration that, in the same policy window, expanded refugee access specifically for one group, while pursuing aggressive detention infrastructure aimed at others. Crockett's argument is that you don't get to call that coincidence. You call it what it is. This is exactly why floor speeches like this one matter beyond the 5 minutes they take up. It's not just about one town or one facility. It's about what gets built, where, for whom, and why and who has to organize and fight to stop it from happening to their community. So tell me what you think. Does the Hutchins story change how you see what's happening at ICE facilities across the country, or do you think Crockett's connecting some dots that aren't really there? Drop your take in the comments. If you want more of these floor speeches and hearings broken all the way down, no spin, no letting it slide, hit subscribe. I'm Caleb Morgan, and I'll see you in the next one.